Hello, my lovely listeners. I'm Dr. Mary Barson.
And I'm Dr. Lucy Burns. Welcome to this episode of Real Health and Weight Loss.
Good morning, lovely listeners. I am Dr. Mary Barson and I am joined by my fabulous partner in crime, Dr. Lucy. Hello, Dr. Lucy.
Hello, Dr. Mary. How are you this morning?
Excellent. Yes, I'm feeling good and positive and not too stressed, which is nice. How are you?
I am awesome. Had a great weekend. It's just, I don't know, I'm looking out right now at the window. It's pretty sunny, so the sun always makes me feel good. So no, awesome. Awesome is what I am going to say. I'm going to go with awesome.
Awesome, good. I've certainly been engaging a lot of self-care this last weekend, which ties in very nicely to our topic today. Lucy, would you like to talk about what we are going to talk about today?
Absolutely. So, you know, lovely listeners, we've had a series called Complicated Basics, and we're just diving in a little with more detail to some of the common terms that people will use when it comes to health and well-being. And so today's Complicated Basic is, what is stress?
Yes.
So, Dr. Mary, maybe, you know, being the biochemist that you are, could you please explain to our listeners, when we're talking about stress, what do we actually mean?
Yes, so stress, the importance of stress cannot be stressed enough. And stress is a physiological state that we get into that alters the physiological milieu within our body that has varying effects on us. And stress is caused by various things. There's emotional stress when something is upsetting us, something is making us fearful. And there's also physiological stress that can be induced by inflammation in the body and other disease processes. And when we talk about stress, the most sort of significant one that we do talk about is emotional stress. And it's literal changes in our physiology. And stress is epidemic at the moment, and it really, really is a very significant problem. Is there sort of this epidemic of stress, that chronic stress that we all have, or most of us have in our lives in this sort of modern hectic lifestyle. And there really are two types of stress that we need to differentiate here. There's short-lived little moments of stress, which we doctors like to call acute stress, acute just meaning of short duration. And then there is that long-term sort of day in, day out chronic stress, chronic meaning a long duration. And that's the same process, it's the same physiological process, but little short, sharp bursts of stress here and there in our lives is not particularly detrimental to our health. In fact, it's probably actually beneficial, but we're chronic day in, day out stress when we're stuck in a physiological state of stress that is really damaging to our health.
And I think, again, we will be looking at chronic again being long-term psychological stress, but I'm sure that similar things happen for chronic physiological stress. So, for example, in chronic infections or chronic illnesses, they also cause a similar response to chronic emotional stress. It's fascinating.
It is. I find that the most useful way to describe the physiological changes that happen with stress is to talk about acute stress, and because this short-term stress, because this is what it evolved. So like pretty much all animals, I'm not an expert in comparative zoology, so don't get me to talk about the physiology of sea slugs, because I couldn't. But certainly all mammals, and I'm guessing most animals, naturally have a physiological stress response that we have evolved to cope with situations where where our lives or the lives of our loved ones were under threat, under a sudden, short, sharp, acute threat. And a good example is just, being chased by a bear. If you could imagine that there's a bear in the room with you, I'm actually getting a little bit stressed just sort of thinking about having a bear in the room with me. I can feel the butterflies in my tummy and my heart rate going up, and the physiological changes are taking place just from me imagining that I'm in close proximity to a bear. So we've evolved this mechanism, this acute stress response, to help us survive situations like being chased by a bear. And they're incredibly useful. It has helped our ancestors survive bear attacks and saber-toothed tiger attacks and help them survive tribal warfare and all kinds of things. So it is really, really, really useful. But it's when the metaphorical bears become a chronic thing, always stressed about your teenagers or your mortgage or the unhelpful people at work or, chronic stressors that we get
prolonged deadlines, running late for school pickups. Just giving a few of my own here.
So I'm going to go through a person being chased by a bear and just sort of go through a few of the physiological things that are happening in that person who's running pell-mell away from the bear who wants to eat them. Okay, so when you see a bear, your signals go straight to the amygdala, into your brain. Your hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis in your body is activated. Your body gets flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, and all of these changes start taking place. And it primes you up, ready to fight off the bear or to run away from the bear. And sometimes there is also another one, a freeze. This can happen to people in acute stress as well, which, could be a bit useful if you could just play dead and hide behind a bush. You might also survive. But let's go. If we're running behind a bear. So when someone is being acutely stressed, blood pressure goes up. And that helps get more blood to the brain. This is actually a really, really good thing, helping you think fast, become hypervigilant. But you can imagine if that's chronic stress, you get chronic high blood pressure, which can increase the risk of lots and lots of different diseases. The other thing is that your blood gets a bit more clotty, so the platelets get a bit stickier. And this is useful because if the bear actually manages to bite you with your sort of stickier, more clotty blood, the bleeding will stop more quickly. You're less likely to lose a life-threatening amount of blood. But in chronic stress, when you've got that chronic sort of stickiness and clottiness of your blood, it's not good. It increases your risk of having strokes and heart attacks. It's not good at all. In the short term, you become acutely insulin resistant when you're stressed. And this is great. It means that your body won't store any of the sugar in your liver and muscle cells, and you actually sort of dump out a whole lot of sugar in the form of glycogen stores so that your muscles have got more sugar available to move fast, more sugar for your brain. And that's useful to give you a big burst of energy so that you can run really fast. But long term, this contributes to insulin resistance, which is at the hallmark of all kinds of metabolic diseases, which is really, really dangerous for your health, like fatty liver, type 2 diabetes, as well as weight gain. Stress actually contributes to weight gain in a relatively significant way.
Yes, absolutely. Stress is like eating bread. It just...
That's right. Cortisol is liquid bread. That's right.
Yes. It just increases your blood glucose. And again, if you're running from the bear, that's fine. You'll burn it all off. But for most of us, we're not running from a bear. We're sitting in our car getting angry that the traffic lights haven't changed, stressing because we're going to be late. And so the glucose goes up and insulin comes out to play.
Yep. And insulin, a fat-storing hormone, yep, it's not our friend if weight loss is one of our goals. The other thing is that your body starts to pull resources away from digestion, so the blood supply to the gut and other what could be, quote, non-essential, end quote, bodily functions just in that acute moment of being chased by the bear. Resources are diverted away from digestion because you just don't actually need to digest your food right now. You need to survive the bear attack. Makes sense. But, if you've got prolonged sort of resources pulled away from your gut and digestion, that can contribute to chronic digestive issues like irritable bowel syndrome. Stress is a significant contributor to that, which can be incredibly unpleasant for people.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is that sometimes people go, I've been diagnosed with irritable bowel and, the doctor said it's stress-related, and they feel somewhat dismissed, like they're not believed that it's a physical issue. And I think it's really important to be very clear that stress, whether as I said, whether it's, emotional or physiological, occurs in your body.
Yes, absolutely yes. And stress is really important. But when I tell someone that stress is significantly contributing to their suffering, to their illness, I'm by no means dismissing them. But then the next part would be to give them lots of tools to deal with their stress. But you're absolutely right, Lucy. Like, our emotions, they are physiological. They happen within our body. It's not like anger, sadness, fear is some sort of little thought bubble that occurs in like a little thought cloud floating above our heads, separate to our body. Those things happen within our body and they literally change our physiology. And it's important to be able to manage them. Stress is unavoidable, sadness, anger, all these things are unavoidable, but we can learn to improve our resilience to them, which we will go through very soon. Going back to the acute physiological changes, another thing that goes on when we're being chased by a bear or we're stressed is that we become hypervigilant. So our emotional brain, the part of our brain that's always looking out for threats, and becomes hypervigilant, which is great when, again, being chased by a bear, you can sort of see the danger, you can run away, you're looking to see where your baby is, are they okay? All of these things are happening, which is really useful in an acute stressful situation. But if this becomes long term, then it can really increase. We become far more prone to anxiety and other mental illnesses, and sort of hypervigilance when it's long term can be really detrimental to our health and well-being.
Absolutely. I was talking to a lady just the other day about this, where before she's even got into work, her brain is thinking of all the fires she's going to have to put out. So for the few hours before she goes in, her physiological response is that of stress. So her blood pressure's up, her heart rate's up, her platelets are sticky, her blood glucose is up. She's already looking. And so she goes into work primed. So therefore, something that might be smallish, that perhaps in other times wouldn't bother her, suddenly it's like confirmation. Well, there it is. There's that fire I've been waiting for. I can't believe it. And it sets up a whole system of, this preconceived stress response.
Yes, absolutely. It makes you far less resilient when you've got that elevated stress to the normal ups and downs of life. The final sort of physiological aspect that I'll discuss with short-term and long-term stress, describing the physiology, is inflammation. So in the short term, our immune system gets fired up and we get acutely inflamed. And this is, again, helpful in case we get bitten by the bear, or, as running away from the bear, we sort of fall over and gash our leg on a dirty log. It means that our immune system already has a head start. It's already there, it's primed, it's ready to go to deal with any infection, to deal with any problem or injury, infection or injury that comes up from this acute sort of threatening situation. And it helps us recover much more quickly than we would if we didn't have that. So it's extremely helpful, helped our ancestors survive bear attacks. But when that inflammation becomes chronic and unresolved, which it can do with chronic stress, then this increases our risk of pretty much every modern chronic disease that there is.
Yeah. And I love that way that you just described the sort of unresolved, because you're right, in all human processes, it's like a loop. There's a circle, it gets closed and dealt with. Good, moving on. But if we can't close that loop because, for example, talking about our sugar one last week, there's too much glucose to close the loop, or if there's too much stress to close the loop, then you've got these sort of not unresolved processes going on in our body, which then, our body likes to resolve things, really does.
That's right. The hormonal processes, like all our hormonal processes, have got sort of redundant negative feedback loops built in with them, because it is supposed to be something that's turned on and turned off. And once you got to safety, made sure your kids were okay and the situation of the bear attack is resolved, you'd certainly feel exhausted, you'd feel a whole lot of emotions, but the stress response would turn itself back off again.
Yeah, the loop is closed.
Yes, that's right. That's sort of the physiological causes, the physiological sort of problems with stress. But there's more than that. Like, they do go beyond that. And our listeners are particularly interested in weight gain, understandably. And we talk a lot, Lucy, about how important effective stress management is to weight management. And we touched on one of those reasons why is that elevated stress, elevated cortisone results in elevated blood sugar, results in elevated insulin, and insulin is our fat-storing hormone. So in that way, I love how you say that, Luce, that cortisol is liquid bread. And
Totally.
but there are other ways too in which chronic stress can make us more prone to store body fat and make it harder for us to lose body fat.
Tell me more, Maz. Tell me more.
I would be delighted. So chronic stress, it interferes with our natural hunger and satiety hormones. So like when we're stressed, ghrelin, one of our main hunger hormones, is activated, so we get more hungry, and it suppresses our satiety hormones, so we're less likely to feel full. As also, it actually literally makes us want to eat more food. It also affects the type of foods that we crave through a few mechanisms. When we are stressed, we crave more carbohydrates. So, someone who's utilising a low-carb real food diet to try and improve their weight, to improve fat loss, can find it really difficult when they're stressed, because when you're stressed, you're going to want to eat more and you are going to have more problems with carbohydrate cravings. Cortisol sort of also can influence our dopamine reward system. So that's probably how it increases the cravings. We get, through its effect on dopamine and peptide Y, neuropeptide Y, we get into this state where our brain feels that we really need the carbohydrates. So that's a manageable state, but it is really, really difficult, and it absolutely contributes to weight gain.
Absolutely. And it also, I think, contributes, it's part of the reason why, and I know we don't use this term, but people understand it, is this falling off the wagon business. Part of the reason that people do that is because they've, got experiencing intense stress, perhaps don't have the tools to manage it, or perhaps it's unmanageable in the short term. I mean, that we have to accept that as humans, sometimes there's stuff that goes on that's outside our control. But it's really then about the idea that we love talking about: recognize what's going on, using your SLC, so your self-reflection, your learning, and you're doing it with compassion. You can understand what's happening for you, not just have this assumption that I can't do this, I just keep binging, it's not working, and giving yourself a lot more insight into what's happening for you.
Yes, absolutely. And just because you are stressed doesn't mean that you therefore have to eat all the carbs in the world. It simply means that you'll have more cravings, and that you'll be more prone to do that, and that you can absolutely learn other tools and find other ways to manage those situations. And things that can be really helpful is ensuring that as much as you can, you're getting enough sleep, but that can be hard when you're stressed because stress interferes with your sleep. But finding ways to soothe yourself that aren't food related, getting outside, getting in nature, talking to a friend. And I would also say, it's a little bit controversial, but I think avoiding excess caffeine is important when you're quite stressed as well.
I don't think it's funny, isn't it? We go, oh, so controversial. But when you think about the physiological response of caffeine, what does it do? It increases your heart rate. It makes you stay awake. It is a stimulant.
Yeah, it exacerbates your stress response. That is what it heightens it. It does. I say it's controversial because I mention that to people and they're like, "Don't you dare take away my coffee."
I know, and because it is a tool. It's their tool to cope. It's their tool because they're tired. The caffeine will keep them stimulated so they can do what they need to do. But again, it's one of those things it's not addressing the root cause.
Yeah.
So, Mary, if you were to, talk to somebody about addressing the root cause of stress for them, what sort of things would you talk to them about?
Yeah, so it's kind of twofold, I reckon. First of all, you want to see what stress you can avoid. And that's usually a pretty difficult conversation. And often there actually isn't much that can be done. Stress in life is going to be unavoidable, People are going to stress us out. Children are going to stress us out. Partners are going to stress us out. Colleagues are going to stress us out. Our finances are going to stress us out. The state of the world is going to stress us out. There's a heck of a lot that goes on that is outside of our control.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because I'm just reflecting briefly on my own experience where I have recently found my workplace to be, working too much for me. Other people might look and go, well, she doesn't work that much. Why is she worried? But for me, there was too much. So I made a decision to reduce my work hours, and that's been enormously helpful. I think, though, like initially I was sort of feeling guilty because I thought, well, you know, I'm letting people down. I've got the time. I could do it. But actually making that really brave decision, I think it does take some bravery to go, you know what, for the long haul, I need to reduce now.
Yes, it's setting boundaries for yourself to protect your energy and protect your stress levels. I definitely can do them, but they are something that I find just my natural, highly empathetic personality structure. I find boundaries both incredibly important to develop, maintain and protect, and also very difficult to create. But they're definitely worth it. So boundaries, the power of a good no. The ability to say no. No is about the most powerful word in the world, I think.
It is. And in fact, so powerful, we're doing it in our membership this month, the November.
Yes.
It's a good one, isn't it? So, yeah, I think we could probably do a podcast on boundaries at some stage in the future. But, yeah, it is something that is hard to do initially, but like any muscle, the more times you say no, the easier it becomes.
It does, yep. So that's sort of the first thing to reduce stress, and it's arguably the hardest. And what stress can you reasonably reduce is an important thing to at least look at. And also accepting that stress is unavoidable. You know, if you choose to have a house, you will have a mortgage, and that's just unavoidable, and that's just a part of stress. And yeah, so we cannot, and it would be completely unreasonable, and indeed you wouldn't even want to be able to avoid all stress in life, or stressors in life. But then the second very powerful thing that we can do to reduce the harmful effects of stress is to change our internal environment. And this we can do through various really doable actions. We can improve our resilience. And I would like to, again, sort of talking about a patient interaction I had a few years ago, which can highlight really importantly how we think about our stress and how we react internally to our stress can make a big difference. So it was a married couple that I saw a while ago, and they were both my patients, and I happened to see them in a close period of time separately. And they'd had a really big argument about their finances. It was a big argument, you know, the kind of thing that, you know, not outside the realm of just normal marital discord, but it was really big and it was unpleasant, and they both really disliked the experience. And one of them came and saw me just distraught, just an absolute mess. You know, we had this argument. I just don't think that they love me anymore. This keeps happening to me. I'm so unlovable. I really believe that the relationship is over, and having this internal turmoil about this argument where there's all these stories playing out in their heads about how this argument was proof that their relationship was over, that they can't do relationships, and they were just in a terrible state. And then a while later, I saw the other member of this married partnership was two women, as it happens, and the other person was like, we had an argument. It was pretty awful. I think my partner's still pretty upset about it, but I think we're okay now. And like, it was feeling really quite fine. Had the argument, didn't like it. Now they were fine. Two people had the exact same experience, like the exact same external event of this argument, but they had vastly different internal experiences. One had ongoing stress, really deep fundamental changes in her physiology, and she was really unwell. And the other person was able to brush it off like, oh, that sucked, but it's over now.
Do you know what? And again, this comes back to one of our previous episodes where we talked about the idea that there's an event creates your thoughts create your feelings. And we can then go that your feelings are your stress response. You know, your feelings create your actions. So in this case, one thought, nothing of it. Oh, well, we've had a fight, it's normal. All couples fight. So she was feeling quite okay about it. The other one's feelings was, this is another example of what a terrible person I am, that nobody will love me and that everyone always leaves me. And so her internal dialogue, again, completely different, with completely different outlay.
And one's health was really adversely affected. The other person's health was not adversely affected. And of course, there are complicated emotional reasons why those two women experience that situation really differently. And, we can't do a lot to change our upbringing, et cetera, but we really can, right here, right now, today, tomorrow, every day for the rest of our lives, take simple, doable steps to improve our resilience so that we can bounce back much faster from stressful events and keep our lives much more in the feeling okay most of the time, punctuated by acute periods of stress, rather than being pulled into the chronically stressed sort of environment or internal environment, which we really, really want to avoid.
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting. So I have a little framework that I use for stress management. It's important to be able to soothe in the moment, where you're anxious and you're feeling worried and you're upset. And again, if you think about mammals, and we are mammals, how do we soothe our young? We comfort them. We will hold them. We will hug them. We will say, nice things. We will use a low voice, and we will calm their emotional distress, which in turn soothes their physiology. And we can do that to ourselves. We just don't think about it a lot of the time. But if I love the idea that you hold your hand. You can do whatever feels good for you. But for me, I hold my hands on my chest. And I may do a little circular movement depending on what's happening. And it's just that little rubbing. And in my head, I talk to myself like we're a partnership. So it will be something like, I always use the we term. I don't know why, it just feels good. It's like, it's not just me, it's Lucy and me doing this together. And so we'll be all right. We'll be okay. We will be fine. It will be okay. This is hard, but we will get through it. They're the sorts of sentences that I like to use that can just make me feel a bit safer in the moment.
Yeah. I write them down in a journal in moments of acute distress. That's another sort of tool I'll have. I'll write down it's okay, I could do this, you've got this, write them down. I love that you mentioned kids, because children in many respects actually outsource their stress management to their primary attachment figure, which is namely their parents, and and if we are calm, then they can be calm. Especially true with younger kids. And if we're stressed, they just catch it straight off us. So they kind of mirror whatever our amygdala is doing, that's what their amygdala will do.
Absolutely. And then for a lot of us, we spend our time, part of our brain becomes distressed when we are either ruminating in the past about something that's happened, again, an unresolved loop, or we're worrying into the future about what might happen. And we're not spending as much time in the here and now.
Absolutely. And our brains can do both at the same time. You could be ruminating about the past and worrying about the future simultaneously, which is not a helpful place to be. Yeah.
Well, no, in fact, that causes immense distress. And the thing about it is, as we know, you haven't closed the loop on the ruminating, and unless you're Hermione Granger, you can't go in a time machine and change what's happened. We just can't. So sometimes the emotion that we will describe as stress, it might be regret, it might be sorrow. There's all sorts of things that, again, we, in Australia in particular, maybe in other Western countries, we're not super good at our emotional literacy. But either way, what happens is that the physiological response is for something that has either happened in the past or something that may never happen in the future. But the physiological response is happening right now.
That's right. It's affecting your health now.
Yeah, when we're in a situation where we're perhaps perfectly safe. So, I've certainly done it. I'll be sitting at my desk and suddenly I'm stressed about something. Like there's no bear. There's nothing coming to get me right at this moment or in real time at all. The event is in my mind. But again, our body doesn't know the difference. It honestly doesn't.
No. It doesn't know if we're stressed because we're being chased by a bear or we're stressed because we're running late for school pickup. It's exactly the same physiological response. Exactly the same.
Or if we're stressed because of something, potential spot fires into the future. And that doesn't mean you can't plan. Planning is helpful. But worrying, again, another emotion we don't necessarily talk about, worrying about something that may never happen is really unhelpful. And God knows, we've all done it. I mean, that's part of human nature. But recognizing that that's what you're doing. So the key, and again, we're probably running out of time to go into it in super detail. Maybe we'll talk about this next week, is training your brain to spend time in the present. And that's what mindfulness is. It's about training. And it takes a while. It doesn't happen straight away. And I think that's what people get disappointed, because they'll try meditation or they'll try being mindful and they'll give it a couple of goes and then think it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I reckon we'll do that next week. What do you think, Maz?
Oh, it's one of my absolute most favourite topics in the entire world. I'll be up for that, Dr. Lucy.
Beautiful.
And the real benefits with meditation and mindfulness, this sort of active relaxation, it literally changes your physiology, which we could talk about next week. But the benefits come with a regular practice. To use the analogy of, it's like brushing your teeth. If you just brush your teeth, once a month, you'll probably get terrible tooth decay. Yeah. But if you brush your teeth regularly, then you will you'll maintain good oral health. So it's a little thing. It doesn't have to be very much. Could even be a few minutes a day. But when you get into a regular pattern of it, that is when your physiology changes for the better. And basically every single part of your life can change for the better along with it.
And it's your body that will change. Okay, yes, you'll feel better and you'll be happier, but your actual body will change as well. And that's what real health and weight loss is all about.
Absolutely. It's another one of those pleiotropic interventions. It has lots and lots and lots of benefits.
Wonderful. Do you know what, Maz? I'm going to go and do some meditating right now.
I'm motivated. Yep, let's do it.
Okay. All right, lovely listeners. We will see you all. No, we won't see you. You will hear us next week. And we're going to be taking a deeper dive into meditation as part of our Complicated Basics series. Goodbye for now.
Bye now.
So, my lovely listeners, that ends this episode of Real Health and Weight Loss. I'm Dr. Lucy Burns.
And I'm Dr. Mary Barson. We're from Real Life Medicine. To contact us, please visit rlmedicine.com.
And until next time, thanks for listening.